Slocke, so good to talk to you about the Hinterstein Campaign and your participation there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It was honestly probably one of my top three experiences, I would say.
It's great. Well, glad to hear it. We'll go through the details here and hopefully get some people excited about joining us for future games. What we're trying to do here is give a wrap up of your experience, but also show people what it's like to play in one of these games from the limited perspective of one of the players. So, in this one, we're going to actually conduct an upgrade where we're going to have maps that we walk through on the screen. So if you're a listener, you can look at the screen and we'll be talking to six maps and a set of orders that you gave, and so that way it's easier for folks to follow along. So talk a little about your first role. So the you were on the red team, part of the red forces, the Vulcanreich forces, and you were given a reconnaissance detachment role. Talk a little bit about the initial orders you had there and the role you played in kind of developing the theory there.
So yeah, my I was able to get a command of a detached element with I believe one infantry regiment, some artillery, and some cavalry. Our orders were to move kind of as a screen against the southern flank. We started off at Trebin, and then we were to secure home, and with the main objective of securing that river crossing to the south of the city there. Other than that, I didn't really get too much direction. I actually listened to you and Swen's talk from the last episode you guys did with my
Yeah.
CIC, and I guess without further orders, I did exactly what he wanted me to do.
Yeah, how about that? Well, I think yours is a story of initiative, and so this is overall you did a terrific job in this game because you had two different roles. So right now we're talking about your first role, and then you switched to a second role, which we'll talk about when we get to the battle. But if all of the audience will look at map one, it's 18 October, which was the start of the scenario. You were in Treblin, which is to the far northwest of the map there. So you were given a small contingent, not a small, you were given a brigade-sized contingent with infantry and cavalry, and you were ordered to go down through home to the river. So that was the extent of your orders.
Right. And once I secured that, I placed my artillery on top of that hill, kind of in between home and the river. And I thought, well, if the blue forces come up that road, I don't think there's much I can do, but I might be able to establish a little bit of a choke point there to at least get word to my command, letting them know, hey, we're about to be outflanked, maybe inflict a couple casualties. But I was sending dispatches, and I used small detachments of cavalry to scout in front of me. So the first day we ended at the mouth of that mountain pass there, just past Trebin, and I sent a small detachment to the other side just so I wasn't caught in the ravine there going through.
Right.
And once I got south, so my philosophy as a subordinate commander usually is listen to CIC, to their orders.
Uh
But
huh.
beyond that, once you've secured your objective, try to do the best you can to improve the situation for your forces in whatever capacity you can.
Yeah.
So I left behind the infantry because I thought that would just slow me down, and at the very least, they would be a better guard against any forces coming up that road
So
than.
this is when you're at home. So I've brought up map two, and you're at home now. You've put some forces up on the hill overlooking the river. You've got your main forces in home itself, and then you decided to push south from there.
Right. Yep.
Got it. Okay.
And kind of the philosophy there was let's see what we find. Had no idea that the blue forces were had previously been that close, and that's where they actually started on the map. So
Right.
I'm grateful that my cavalry didn't ride as hard as I wanted them to.
Right. Right.
I don't know what that would have done, what chaos that would have created, but I know I probably wouldn't have survived that fight coming up on the rear of an entire army column.
Well, now you're here on the west side, You're headed south. You're on the west side of the map. You're crossing the river, and both armies, red and blue, are actually heading east. So everybody's heading away from you, and you didn't know it. You were going right into the what essentially became the rear area for the blue force. So, um, in my experience as a player, it can be unnerving when you just keep going and nothing is there. What were you thinking as you as you began to reach the river itself and find that you still weren't having any contact?
Uh, I was more nervous about the fact that I wasn't getting any messages from my friendly forces.
Right.
I had been sending out dispatches. Was wondering if they had been arriving, if my dispatch riders had returned. So I was just looking for any news whatsoever of where my friendly forces were, because for all I knew, they had already been engaged at Drosh and had a defeat there.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and just a little cavalry brigade hanging out, in the middle of, holding a little hill. I don't think I would have been able to win the battle from there.
Well, in fact, on the 21st of October, approximately, they were actually engaged at Drosh and beginning to outmaneuver that garrison there, the blue garrison, as the blue forces continue to move east. Um, at that point, so if we go to map 3 now, we're going to look at map 3, and we see there that you then start to push south of the river. What's your thinking now as you begin to really kind of get assertive and push south?
So that's where my philosophy comes in. I've secured my primary objective. I know that the enemy probably has some type of supply depot. There's a rail line down south. Uh, cavalry's really mobile. If there's a division down there, I doubt they could mobilize in time to chase me down if I do some hit and run tactics. But I was trying to be very smart with sending out scouts ahead of
Right.
me to make sure there wasn't that division lurking over the next mountain pass.
Right.
um, yeah, kind of like what Swentz was saying as well is using examples from the Civil War that cavalry is more of a mobile force at this time and good at really raiding supply trains, stuff like that. So I thought, well, we've secured our objective. We might as well do something. I don't think my CIC is going to be too upset if I write them telling them, "Hey, I pushed a little further south, but I've destroyed an entire army supply depot."
Right. Which you
And I think
so
if we,
we're showing
I,
map 3, which is 23 October, but you in fact used Freeg, which is the town between south of the river. You use that as a jumping off point. You sent one set of horsemen forward, and then you brought another force up. What was your thinking there in terms of the towns and the depot that you ended up attacking?
So I thought with that major of a town, there would have had to been some type of defensive garrison there.
Right.
If so, my orders for that, I actually ended up doing a little bit more role playing in that than anything. I believe my orders were that the scouts were supposed to go south and sweep around, and my main cavalry force would march through the night from Frigg and enter Draub at first light and more or less surprise the garrison while they're still waking up. And this wasn't in my report, but in my mind it was a Ludendorff moment of walking up to the local mayor with my sword and banging on the door.
Right. You had your Ludendorff moment. I love that. Okay. So that's like the 15 minutes. We all in life at some point have our Ludendorff moment. Terrific. So um, but you really outran your supply. Talk a little bit about how you thought about the fact you were so far from any source of supply. The only source of supply you had from your forces were up in Raful, which is up in the very north, right?
Right. Supply wasn't that big of an issue for me. I figured my infantry would be pretty well supplied from Raful. And the
Hmm.
cavalry, once again, they're supposed to be a mobile force. So I figured there had to be some type of supplies in Drob. If we didn't get into an engagement, well, we can buy food off of the locals. If there's an ammo dump there, we can replenish any cartridges we used. So I was just thinking, all right, for a cavalry force, it shouldn't be that big of an issue to be out of supply, and also with farm fields around, be able to feed the horses and so forth. So that's another reason that I was thinking of leaving the infantry behind.
Right.
Just that supply drag on the column for those guys.
So you had a complete rating mentality when it came to that force. You got down into Drosh, and in fact, successfully cut the rail line. There would have been a small security contingent there in Drosh, but you actually did cut the rail line west.
Yes, yep. As soon as we had the town secured, I think I gave my men a day's break and then told them, start destroying anything of military value. If we're forced out of here, we're not leaving anything for them when they come back. Um, Kind of next step was, all right, once we've destroyed that stuff, I was going to send some scouts up the road to the north towards Krum and also secure the town of Schwan. Well, not I don't think secure is the right word to use with
Yeah.
the size of force I was using.
Right. Right. It would be difficult to secure, but you certainly would have caused a lot of trouble. And in fact, if the scenario had continued at an operational level, the Blue Force would have had to have done something about you back there roaming around and causing problems.
Right. And that was also part of my thinking as well, that hey, if I can, because at that point I received in the news channel the word about the battle happening at Drosh. I
Right.
don't think the battle outside of Holm had the first battle of Holm had taken place yet, but I knew something was developing in the east. So my thought
Right.
also was, hey, if I can get the blue forces to take a division and go chasing after a small cavalry force, that's a win in my book.
Yeah, it was a win. So I would give you an A+ for this action on this side. First of all, moving and achieving the blocking or the threatening position, really is a blocking position at home, and then expanding on that while not abandoning the original mission. So I think a terrific job. You caused a disproportionate amount of problem for the Blue Force. And I think the lesson learned for anybody looking at this, if you're on the Blue Forces, a battalion with a couple of guns and Free would have been good security. So because they really left that whole side open. So this is the first part of the operational level, and well done, well done. I really can't fault you um, for taking advantage of what ended up being a backdoor back to the Blue Forces, which would have caused them problems over time. So I'm going to bring up now map 4, which is we switched, and just based on the nature of um, based on the nature of our number of players and the way it worked, I had to give you another command in the battle. So we're now moving to the Battle of Elmbach, which is was later in the scenario, and really was the big tactical battle. And you were able to command the 15th Division, which was part of the Vulcanreich third. I'm sorry, 12th Corps with Kreis as your commander, right? Chris as
Yes.
your commander.
Yep.
Crisis is, I believe, the way he likes to describe it. So what that's his how he pronounces the name, because it comes from Greek mythology. So talk a little bit about the planning. First of all, as a player, the experience of going from one to the other, was it easy to do that? Was it disorienting, shifting around? Talk a little bit about that. Playing two different roles in a game.
So I would say I'm not really a good test case for that, because pretty much the entire game I had been at the tactical level, just with the size of the force I had.
Yeah.
Maybe if I was in command of a larger force, that might have been a little bit of an issue. The only issue I would say I had was, okay, where are we on the general map?
Right.
Because it's on the complete other side of what I've been looking
Right.
at the past 3 days,
Right. Right.
in-game days, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But planning was pretty good. Our commander Crisis, he gave us a pretty good rundown of the situation. I think both divisions worked well together. I will say I didn't know that we had that small. I believe that's a cavalry brigade, the fifth, or no, that's the
The
fifth
Fifth
corps.
Corps, yeah, it was the remnants of the Fifth Corps that had gotten chewed up in an earlier tactical engagement. So it was the remains of the Fifth.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I was completely unaware of their presence the entire time.
right, right. Which I think is so interesting. It's certainly a feature of Kriegspiel in that while today, as we talk about this, the audience and ourselves are looking at the whole map. What you saw was just what we have circled in yellow. So you really saw just what was in yellow and right around it, which was you had the river to your north and you had the 16th to your south, and of course some pesky blue forces in front of you to your left or the west. And that's all you saw in each of the reports that you got.
Right. Yep. I will say that I had a little bit of difficulty there at first. I thought we were further from the initial screenshot I had for the first couple turns of the battle. I thought we were further east, more closer
Hmm.
to Treb,
Right.
and then further west, closer to Tanhoff. So, but overall, I would say that that didn't change my overall strategic thinking about the battle that was about to take place there.
Yeah. Now we're shifting around. There was a good number of hours played on the first day of the battle. The first map that we're showing, which is map 4, is earlier in the morning, and you really didn't move a whole lot, but you fought that whole line most of the day. Talk about, did you ever have a moment where you thought you needed to move, you needed to attack more, you needed to pull back, or were you pretty steady the whole time? What was your perspective as each of these turns continued to play out?
So at first, my main goal was to make sure my right flank in the north was always anchored along the river,
Right.
uh, because I knew at the very least if the enemy got between us and the river, they'd probably surround our entire corps, which would not be good for our team. And when I thought, because we drove the cavalry off pretty quickly, but
Right.
the blue infantry came up pretty fast, and it was more of an exploratory. All right, let's see what we're up against. Sent out the initial. I don't know if it was an attack. I think I might have sent out skirmishers as our guns were
You
getting
did.
together.
You sent out, both sides actually sent out skirmishers. So the map we're looking at now shows the original blue cavalry screen, and then I'll go ahead and shift maps right now. Okay, and then now what you see is how things manifested. You see the cavalry begin to pull down. So I'm looking at now at map 5, and you are now at a skirmishing uh, with the blue skirmishers, and so you're both moving in, and you really both had similar orders. That was to make contact with skirmishers and develop the situation.
Right. I knew my guns weren't in position yet. I knew at least in this time period, any attack without artillery support is probably destined to fail, and in almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
I'm also not the type of person. Also, because I'm anchored against the river, there, I'm not going to go right into the attack. Probably could have, but I don't know what my forces are doing to the south. I know they have some woods to contend with, so they're not probably not going to be able to shore up my flank. And I think it was at this point that we had a little bit of a miscommunication with my corps commander.
Well,
Um,
talk about that.
so I received an order from my corps commander after I had made that initial contact, and I was actually somewhat surprised by the amount of casualties for just having skirmishers. But my corps commander told me to advance behind my guns, and I took that as advance under the cover of my artillery.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. I think I paid a little bit of a heavy price for it.
Yeah.
And when we were in our night planning session, my commander kind of didn't give me a chewing out over it, but why did you attack? And I said, you told me to advance behind my guns.
Right.
And, but their meaning of that was move your guns forward, keep your infantry behind them.
See, I think that's a really interesting point to call out for communications in Kriegspiel play in general, and that's the use of words, right? So the, sometimes commanders will talk about pushing forward or advancing, or these are all things that move your soldiers into fire pockets and create casualties, right? So the use of language is really important. That's a great example of how the interpretation of a word was different from its originator to the receiver of the order.
Right. And even then, I don't think I would have put my artillery in front of me because I knew that there were Blue Force cavalry that had just been repelled.
Right,
And even if my infantry are advancing with my guns, I don't want to put my guns out front in this time period. Maybe if it was a Napoleonic or 7 Years' War scenario, perhaps with the more effective canister shot and so forth. But with looser formations by this time period, I didn't know how effective that would be. So I wanted to make sure my infantry were always supporting my guns to some capacity.
right, right. Well, skirmishers were really bad news for artillery batteries. That was part of in the Franco-Prussian War. The Prussians would lose whole batteries, whole series of batteries there because their gunners would get picked off by skirmishers who were marksmen. So you have to be mindful of that. And you and the opposing force, which is the 38th Blue Division, where a unicorn poacher was the player across from you, both using skirmishers well. So it would have been quite deadly for artillery to be pushed forward into the range of skirmisher fire. So I think you thought correctly about that. Okay.
Yep.
So let's shift to map number 6. So this is the following morning. So you basically fought it out with the 38th most of the day. Neither one of you really attacked with your main line. You pushed skirmishers out. A lot of artillery fire. You pulled back. Both sides. The blue force pulled back a bit. You both camped for the night. Men camping on their weapons, basically. Um, really within close proximity to the enemy force. And the next morning, you got up and you guys went at it again. This time without the artillery, because you all had moved and dislocated enough so that you didn't really have the artillery lined up. Talk about what the thinking was on the following morning.
So from our night planning conference, we were all kind of in agreement that even if we were going to have difficulty crossing through those woods, that would be where our main effort, our first attack, would come from. See if we could break through the woods, keep our flank anchored along the riverside. So from the day before fighting there, finding out the casualty rates in an attack, because I did launch an attack I think 2 hours before sunset, and the blue
Uh huh.
forces counterattacked.
Right.
I wanted to make sure that the skirmishers at least told me where their line is. I would figure that they would dig in to a degree overnight. So make sure those skirmishers grab a hold of them and keep their attention. And then from there, bring up the guns, kind of just barrage their line and maintain that division in place while the southern part of our attack developed.
Right. So your role here was really one to keep the line stable, but also to keep a good sense for where the enemy's line was. So it was a kind of an anchoring role here, which doesn't sound like it's the most dynamic part of the battle, but really it's critical, because if that middle portion where you're at on the river would have moved out of sequence or would have collapsed, it would have caused a real problem for everyone on the red side. Um,
Right. Yes.
yeah. So
Um,
0900, really the last orders of the game, you earned the Volkenreich Order of the Purple Cross. I just made that award up right here on the spot, right? Um, a terrific example of initiative where you made contact with the division that was to the north of the river. You saw that they were putting pontoons in, and you sent a detachment of 50 men to assist with those pontoons, which sped up the creation of those pontoons. Talk about your thinking there, and how that completely that action of completely born of your own initiative came about.
so for the previous couple maps, you could have seen that I try and keep a regiment, some type of unit in reserve
Right,
at all times. I'm never trying to fight the battle for the longest line.
right,
Uh, so my thought was, all right, we're skirmishing the enemy. We've got them in a place where I know they're not going to be able to move. Our guns are up at this point. Uh, if they do try and counterattack, they're definitely going to be catching a lot of shot from those guns. And seeing that pontoon bridge coming across the river, I believe the orders I put right before that too was that I turned to one of my aides I know he knows how to swim,
you
and
did
told
say
him to
that.
also swim across the river.
You told
I
them to
don't know if
swim
he made
across
it or
and find out what was going on. That's right, which was great, right? That
not.
was terrific. That was great.
And I also thought, well, I've got that reserve regiment back there. They definitely aren't needed at this moment. I think 50 guys, having guys across the river to anchor whatever ropes they're going to throw across, anything like that, would help speed that up. Because I figured that most of our forces were in the north, and I knew at
Right,
that point the battle in the south was mostly going our way. If we could get some reinforcements, I knew we'd be able to more or less crush the forces in front of us.
right, right. And they, in fairness, that regiment behind is going to be 3,000 soldiers. So 50 certainly doesn't sap too much of the strength there. And that additional 50 assisted in the speed of the pontoons. Having the pontoons enabled two fresh divisions access to the south, which certainly made for one of the critical elements of the red victory. So while we're not playing a basketball game where the final shot is the winning shot, every little bit helps. That decision that you made definitely helped decide the battle. So that's why you won the Volkenreich Purple Cross. Super job there. So two examples, I think, from the whole game where you used your own initiative and demonstrated that Kriegspiel play can absolutely benefit from intelligent initiative based on the commander's intent. First of all, of course, the first part where you push that cavalry down as a raiding force, which ended up causing a disproportionate amount of problem for blue. And second, here where you decided to take 50 minutes and devote them to those pontoons, which then tipped the balance in the right way in terms of timing. So a couple of great examples there of superb play, man. So hats off to you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's certainly not. Initiative doesn't always mean going on the attack when you think you're able to go on the attack. It's the
Yeah,
little things. It's the little those little support elements that usually win battles.
that's right. That's a great point. I agree with you 100%. So it's almost like offering another piece to of a solution to a problem versus like running off and attacking somebody. So in the case of in both of those cases of your initiative, it wasn't specifically you rushing in to attack something; it was you placing forces in the right spot to tip the balance. So it's good stuff. What what thoughts do you have about the game overall in terms of gameplay, all the mechanics? I know we collect a lot of feedback afterwards, but what other thoughts do you have that the other players might enjoy hearing?
So I really liked the inclusion of the AI like paintings that you guys had in the reports. Those
Yeah,
just
yeah,
helped with the immersion a lot. Maybe not necessarily with the equipment that my guys had, but just all right, that we've been all of our guys are marching. There's some type of battle going on. Just a little bit of extra immersion. I always like those details in there. Um, I will say the only issue that I ever really had was on the first. Once our guns had been brought up on the first day, I ordered them to support our skirmishers. And for about 3 or 4 turns, despite my specific orders not to get in an artillery duel, my artillery commander kept trying to duel the enemy artillery. It worked in
right,
our favor, but I don't know if there's a historical situation for that. But my intention was have our guns go quiet and only fire when because by that point the blue infantry was kind of in cover, and uh, make sure those guns have enough shells that they can fire on any potential blue counterattack. I didn't want them wasting shells on driving off batteries when we already knew we had that initiative.
right. It's real hard. There is ample historical example of guns kind of opening up on each other, just really out of self defense, right? So there's a natural impulse to do that. So your guns were aggregated with the larger groups, and so the larger group reacted to being fired on by the blue. So blue kind of initiated a duel, and then the duel just kind of kicked off. So there's a lot of times, whether it's infantry or artillery, that the don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. The people being fired upon do not comply because they want to strike back, right, and take some of the pressure off. So that happened there. But I appreciate the fact that both sides commanders were being aware of their ammunition stocks and trying not to just um, fire shells indiscriminately, and then when it's needed, not have the ammunition available. So it was a thoughtful order, but the circumstances just kind of got away from it.
Right. I will say that was my main concern on the second day
Yeah,
was if the blue has let's say they brought up another division, do we have the shells to hold off maybe 2 divisions or some type of counterattack in excessive force to ours? Because that was really my main defense, I would say, is those artillery that grand battery we had there on the first day. But I
right,
did know in the
right.
back of my head, you know, artillery shells take up a lot of space, and you
Yeah,
go through them pretty quick.
for sure. And in fact, because supply was so critical, and the your forces, the red forces, had a longer supply line. There was a limit to the number of shells available, and both sides had reached it on the first day. They replenished in the evening, and so you were able to start off the day. But by midday, it would have started to get thin. So I think your thinking there was good. It's hard to keep that frontline control going when things start getting a little chaotic. So good point. Yeah. Terrific stuff. You did a great job on this game. I hope on a couple levels. I hope the players in the game can hear this battle from your perspective, so they can get a little insight into how you played it. I hope the many people who look at the YouTube channel can now see what it's like to actually command one of these units, which is only a portion of a larger battle, and listen to the thinking and the decisions you have to make. Um, but you're a valued player in the guild, and do a great job. And I really enjoy it when you take up a role. And I really appreciate your flexibility from going from an operational level into a tactical battle with two completely different roles.
I appreciate it. I mean, yeah, this was, like I said, top three. I would say games that I've had since I started with the IKS and joining in with this. And yeah, I feel like this was probably one of the more realistic scenarios, not just. And I like that with the screenshots. I know a lot of our other games that we have, we put a counter on units of what
Yeah,
their one, not damage or whatever we track, but this, with just having the pure blocks and having to deduce their reactions, you don't know that an enemy, if they take one more hit, one more good volley, 9 times out of 10, oh, they're definitely going to break no matter what happens to my guys.
right. Yeah, that min maxing where you watch the tokens change on the other side is I tend to not like to provide that. Um, I think what we did lose in this battle because we were at the regimental level versus the brigades. Um, sorry, we're at the brigade level with two regiments versus a regiment with three battalions. Is that we didn't have numbers so that you could see where your 23rd was or your 25th was, et cetera. So those weren't the regimental numbers, but I think therefore all the blocks made it one step too abstracted. So we'll see if we can fix that in the future. Um, but it's just more things to tweak, more things to tweak. But um, well done, man. Thank you for coming on and explaining that. We're going to go through as many players as we can just to really go into the details of the battle. And I really look forward to having you back in another game.
All right, I look forward to the next one, and I don't know if I'll try and get in there for CIC. I do enjoy the lower level roles, so
Well, we'll see what we can do. You certainly have the tactical acumen to pull it off, but we'll look forward to the next one.
all right, I
All right, man.
appreciate it.